the village that disappeared overnight. A man steps onto the shore of a small island and walks toward a settlement he once knew. The houses are still standing. Tools remain where they were left, but no one comes out to meet him. There are no voices, no movement, no signs of struggle. Only one word carved into wood. Along the outer banks of what is now North Carolina, in the late 1500s, a group of English settlers built a small colony on Roanoke Island. It was one of the first attempts to establish a permanent English presence in North America. The settlement stood between forest and water, with wooden houses, fenced plots of land, and narrow paths connecting each part of daily life. The people living here were not explorers passing through. They were meant to stay. Families had crossed the Atlantic, bringing tools, seeds, and supplies. They relied on irregular shipments from England and uncertain exchanges with nearby indigenous communities. Every structure in the colony served a purpose, and every day followed routines built around survival and distance. At some point, the colony was left without immediate support, waiting for a return that would take far longer than planned. When that return finally came, the settlement was still there, but the people were not. This is the story of the Roanoke colony. Entering the colony. The settlement stands on a narrow stretch of land, surrounded by water on both sides. Wind moves across the island without obstruction, carrying sand and salt. Around 100 people live here. Families, workers, a governor. Children move between the houses along the same narrow paths each day. Low wooden houses are arranged close together, built from timber cut nearby. The wood is rough and uneven, shaped with simple tools. Some structures lean slightly from wind and shifting ground, but they remain standing. The houses are not identical. Some are larger, built to hold more people. Others are smaller, used for storage or specific work. Between the houses, the ground is worn into visible paths. These paths connect sleeping areas, cooking spaces, and work zones. The soil is sandy, marked by repeated movement. Nothing is paved. Every route has been made by use. Near the center of the colony, tools rest against a wall. A shovel, a hammer, cut wood stacked in uneven piles. A cooking pot hangs over a fire pit that was used recently. The ash is gathered beneath it. These objects are not stored away. They are placed to be used again. Inside one of the houses, space is shared. Larger beds stand against the wall. Smaller sleeping places sit beside them. Clothing is folded and repaired. Fabric is patched and reused. Shoes rest near the entrance, sized for both adults and children. Storage is limited but organized. Barrels hold what can be preserved. Some are partially empty, others are sealed. The contents are measured and used carefully. Water is collected daily. Wood is gathered, cut, and dried. Food comes from small fenced plots and from what can be gathered or traded. The routine repeats across the settlement, shaping each day in the same pattern. Paths lead outward into the forest. The trees form a dense boundary around the cleared land. Narrow tracks run between them, used for hunting and for contact with nearby indigenous groups. Movement between these spaces is constant. At the edge of the island, the land opens toward the water. Boats would be pulled onto the shore here. Supplies from England would arrive at this point, carried inland piece by piece. Barrels, tools, fabric, metal. Nothing arrives easily. The colony is not temporary. Families have been brought here with the intention of staying. The presence of children changes how space is used. Sleeping areas are arranged differently. Food is divided differently. Work is distributed to maintain continuity. Nothing in the settlement suggests sudden destruction. Doors remain attached. Walls are intact. There are no burn marks, no broken structures, no scattered debris. But there are small breaks in the routine. One doorway stands open, facing the path. It is positioned as if it should have been closed. Inside, a storage space is partly cleared. Not empty, but not complete. Some containers remain, others are gone. A section of the path shows deeper marks, as if heavier loads were carried across it more than once. These details do not show panic, they show movement. What is more noticeable is what is missing. Items that could be carried are no longer present. Personal belongings, tools that can be moved, supplies that can be transported. These are gone. What remains are heavier objects, fixed structures, and items that were not practical to take. At the edge of one of the main paths, where movement between the houses naturally passes, a wooden post stands upright. It is positioned where it will be seen immediately by anyone entering or leaving the settlement. The surface has been cut into by hand. The letters are clear, deliberate, and deeply carved into the wood. Croatoan. There is no additional marking beside it, no sign of distress. The carving is controlled even, and intentional. Nearby, a tree carries a shorter marking, CRO. The settlement remains, the structures remain, the routines can still be traced through the objects left behind. But the people who created those routines are no longer here. To understand how a colony like this could be established, sustained, and then left in this way, it is necessary to look at the larger world that brought these people to this island in the first place. A colony at the edge of the world. The settlement on Roanoke Island did not exist on its own. It was part of a much larger effort, organized from across the ocean, driven by distance, competition, and uncertainty. In the late 1500s, England was not yet established in North America. Spain had already built routes, ports, and systems across the Atlantic. Ships moved regularly between continents, carrying resources, goods, and information. England was behind in this system, but actively trying to expand. Roanoke was one of those attempts. The island was selected as a location that could support a permanent presence. It offered access to the coastline, nearby waterways, and inland routes. From here, ships could move, supplies could be received, and future settlements could expand outward. But the position also came with limits. Everything the colony needed had to cross the Atlantic first. Tools, metal, weapons, seeds, clothing, and replacement parts. Nothing could be produced at scale on the island itself. If something broke, it had to be repaired. If something ran out, it had to be rationed. The journey between England and Roanoke was long and unpredictable. Ships depended on weather, navigation, and timing. Delays were common. Storms could push routes off course or prevent departure entirely. This meant the colony existed in a constant state of waiting. Supplies were never guaranteed to arrive when expected. Plans made in England did not always match the conditions on the island. What looked stable on paper could become uncertain in practice. The people sent to Roanoke were not soldiers or temporary explorers. They were settlers. Families were included deliberately. The goal was not just to visit, but to remain and expand. Among them was a governor, John White, responsible for organizing and maintaining the colony. His role connected the settlement to England. Decisions made on the island depended on communication that could take months. Shortly after the colony was established, a problem became clear. The available supplies were not sufficient to sustain the settlement long term. The solution was direct. John White would return to England to gather more resources and organize a resupply mission. The plan was simple. He would leave temporarily, collect what was needed, and return within a short period of time. Before leaving, an agreement was made. If the settlers needed to relocate, they would leave a message carved into wood, indicating where they had gone. If they were forced to leave under danger or threat, they would add a cross to that message. This system was meant to provide clarity across distance and time. White left the colony expecting to return quickly, but events in England delayed that return. At the same time, conflict between England and Spain intensified. Ships were redirected for military use. Resources were prioritized elsewhere. Planned voyages were postponed or cancelled. Time passed. Months became years. The colony remained without direct support. During this period, the settlers had to rely entirely on what they could produce, repair, gather, or exchange locally. The routines inside the settlements became more critical with each passing day. Every decision had longer consequences. Communication between the colony and England no longer existed in real time. There were no updates, no adjustments, no corrections to the original plan. The island remained, but the connection that sustained it weakened. When John White was finally able to return, the conditions that he left behind had changed. The delay was not minor. It had reshaped the entire situation. By the time the ships approached the coastline again, the colony had been without direct support for far longer than intended. What remained on the island would reflect everything that happened during that absence. The next step is to return to that moment when the ships reached the shore again, and the settlement was seen for the first time after years of silence. The return. The ships reached the coastline under controlled movement, adjusting to shallow water and shifting sandbanks. Anchors are dropped at a distance. Smaller boats are lowered. The final approach is slow and deliberate. John White steps into one of the boats. The last time he left this island, the settlement was active. People were working, building, organizing. The structures were still being expanded. The colony was incomplete, but occupied. The boat reaches land. No one is waiting. There are no signals from the shore, no movement along the waterline, no sound of activity. The landing area shows no recent use. The sand is shaped only by wind and tide. White and the others move inland along the path that leads toward the settlement. The forest closes around them. The route is familiar, but quiet. No voices carry through the trees. No signs of movement ahead. They reach the edge of the settlement. The structures are still standing. The layout is unchanged. The houses remain in place. Fences still mark the plots of land. Nothing has been destroyed, but there is no activity. White does not stop at the edge. He continues forward, moving between the houses, checking each space in sequence. Each structure is empty. There are no bodies, no signs of violence, no indication of a struggle. The condition of the settlement suggests time has passed since it was last used. Edges are worn. Surfaces are exposed to weather, but nothing indicates sudden abandonment. White searches for any sign left intentionally. Near the entrance of the settlement, a wooden post stands upright. The surface has been cut into Croatoan. The letters are clear, evenly carved, and placed at eye level. The marking is positioned to be seen immediately by anyone arriving. There is no cross beside the word. Before leaving England, an agreement had been made. If the settlers were forced to leave under threat, they would mark a cross along with their message. The absence of that symbol changes the meaning of what is seen. The word itself refers to a nearby location. Croatoan was the name of an island to the south, as well as the name of a group of indigenous people known to the settlers. Contact between them had existed before. movement in that direction was possible. A second marking is found on a tree. CRO, shorter, less complete, but consistent with the same message. The markings confirm intention. The settlers did not vanish without trace. They left a direction, but there is no additional information. No date, no explanation, no indication of how or when the movement took place. White attempts to continue the search. The next step would be to travel toward Roanoke Island and follow the direction that has been left behind. But conditions do not allow it. Weather begins to shift. Strong winds build along the coastline. The ships cannot safely remain or move further along the shore. The decision is made to delay further exploration. That delay becomes permanent. The expedition leaves without reaching Croatoan. The message remains the only direct clue left at the settlement. What could have been a continuation of the search ends at the shoreline. The direction is known, but it is never followed at that time. To understand why the settlers may have chosen to move, it is necessary to examine the conditions they faced during the years without support and the pressures that would have shaped that decision. Pressure on the colony. The years without support changed the conditions on Roanoke Island in ways that could not be reversed quickly. The original plan depended on regular contact with England. Supplies, tools, and replacements were expected to arrive within a limited time frame. When that system failed, the colony had to operate entirely on what was already present or what could be obtained locally. The available food sources were not stable. The soil on the island was not well suited for European crops. Attempts to grow familiar plants produced inconsistent results. Yields varied and storage was limited. What could be preserved had to last through uncertain periods. Hunting and gathering became necessary additions, but these also depended on knowledge of the land that the settlers did not fully possess. The forest provided resources, but not in predictable quantities. Trade with nearby indigenous groups became more important over time. These exchanges could provide food, guidance, and materials that the settlers could not produce themselves. But trade was not guaranteed. It depended on relationships, timing, and shifting conditions in the region. At the same time, tensions in the area could not be ignored. Contact between the settlers and local groups had already shown signs of strain in earlier expeditions. Misunderstandings, competition for resources, and previous conflicts shaped how these interactions developed. The colony existed within this balance. It depended on external support that no longer arrived, and on local relationships that were not fully controlled. Tools and materials also became limited. Metal could not be easily replaced. Repairs had to be made repeatedly using the same objects. Wood was available but required time and labor to process. Every structure and tool had to last longer than originally intended. The distance from England amplified every shortage. There was no way to request immediate help, no way to adjust supply based on need. Decisions had to be made with incomplete information, knowing that correction would not come quickly. Time became a pressure. Each passing season increased the risk of failure. Food stores could be reduced. Tools could break beyond repair. Relationships with local groups could shift. The presence of families increased the stakes. Children required consistent food and protection. The settlement could not function as a temporary outpost. It had to operate as a stable environment, even as conditions became less stable. Under these pressures, remaining in the same location carried risk. The island offered access to water and routes, but it also limited expansion. Resources were not unlimited. Movement to a different location could provide better access to food, stronger relationships, or more sustainable conditions. Relocation was a known option. The agreement made before White left allowed for movement. The settlers were not required to remain in one place if conditions changed. They could move as long as they left a clear message behind. The marking found at the settlement suggests that this option was used, but relocation was not a simple action. Moving an entire group required coordination. Supplies had to be carried, routes had to be chosen. The destination had to be known or trusted. The choice to leave would not have been immediate. It would have developed over time as conditions became more difficult to maintain. Each day of limited supply, each failed harvest, each uncertain exchange would contribute to the same conclusion. Remaining carried risk. Moving also carried risk. The decision would depend on which option offered a greater chance of continuation. The word carved into the wood points toward one direction, but it does not explain how that decision was made or what happened after it. To explore that, it is necessary to look at how settlements at that time attempted to survive under similar conditions and what usually happened when they did not. The most likely path. The word carved into the wood points in one direction, Croatoan. It is not an unknown place. It is not a random marking. It refers to a location that already existed within the world of the settlers. An island to the south, a place where contact had already taken place. Before the colony was left without support, relationships had been established with the people living there. Communication had occurred. Exchange had occurred. The route was known. Movement toward Croatoan would not have required exploration. It would have required decision. The settlement on Roanoke shows signs of preparation. Items that could be carried were taken. Structures were left intact. There is no evidence of sudden disruption. This pattern aligns with relocation. Not departure in panic, but movement over time. Groups could have left in stages. Supplies carried along the same paths that were already in use. The shoreline offering access for transport. The forest providing cover and routes inland. The presence of families suggests coordination. Children, tools, and essential items would need to be moved together. This limits speed, but increases intention. A group moving in this way is not scattering, it is relocating. Croatoan offered advantages: more stable access to food, established local knowledge, existing communities that understood the land and its conditions. The settlers did not need to create everything from the beginning. Integration would have been possible. Clothing, tools, and methods could be exchanged. Language barriers could be managed over time. Survival would no longer depend on isolated systems, but on shared ones. There is later evidence that suggests this may have occurred. Reports from the region describe indigenous groups with features or objects that appear connected to European origin: metal tools, words, physical traits that do not fully match earlier descriptions. These observations are limited and not fully verified, but they align with the direction indicated at the settlement. Another possibility exists alongside this one. Movement toward Croatoan may not have been the final stage. The initial relocation could have been only the first step. From there, smaller groups may have moved further inland. Some may have remained, others may have continued. Over time, separation could occur. Records would not capture these movements. There was no system to track individuals once they left the original settlement. The identity of the colony would dissolve into the structures of the surrounding region. This does not require a single event. It allows for gradual change. The absence of conflict at the original settlement supports this pattern. There is no evidence of attack, no destruction that would indicate forced removal. What remains is consistent with choice, a decision made under pressure, but still organized. The word left behind provides direction, not conclusion. It connects the colony to a place that was already part of their world. It suggests continuity rather than disappearance. To understand what remains of that continuity, it is necessary to look at what has been found since and how the story is understood today. What remains? The settlement at Roanoke does not exist today in the form it once did. The structures are gone. The wooden houses, the fences, the central spaces where daily life was organized, none of these remain standing. What exists now is the location. The island is still there, shaped by the same water and wind that defined it in the 1500s. The shoreline has shifted. The landscape has changed over time, but the position of the place remains. The colony itself survives only through records, markings, and what has been found in the ground. Excavations in the region have produced objects connected to early English presence, tools, fragments of metal, and items that match the materials used during the period. Some of these findings appear outside the original settlement area, suggesting movement beyond the island. On Hatteras Island, the place once known as Croatoan, similar objects have been discovered. These include items that align with English manufacturing from the late 16th century. Their presence in that location supports the direction indicated by the carving left at Roanoke. These findings are limited. They do not provide a complete record of movement. They do not identify individuals. They do not confirm how many people relocated or how long they remained in any one place. No written account from the settlers themselves has been found. No list of names connected to a new settlement. No record of return. The colony, as a defined group, ends at Roanoke. What may have continued beyond that point does not appear in official documentation. Reports from later periods describe indigenous communities that showed signs of contact with Europeans. Objects of English origin, words that resemble English language, descriptions of physical traits that differ from earlier accounts. These reports are inconsistent and not fully verified. They suggest contact. They do not confirm identity. Over time, any remaining connection to the original colony would become less distinct. Materials would be reused. Language would change. Structures would adapt to new systems. The original identity of the settlers would no longer exist in the same form. What began as a defined colony could continue only as part of something else. The word left behind at Roanoke remains the clearest direct message. Croatoan. It provides direction, but not outcome. It indicates movement, but not destination in detail. It connects the settlement to a place, but not to a final record. The absence of a cross suggests that the movement was not marked as forced. The absence of further information leaves the result open. The colony did not end in destruction that can be traced. It ended in transition that was not recorded. What remains is a location, a carved word, and a set of conditions that point toward movement rather than disappearance. The people who lived in the settlement may have continued, but not in a way that was preserved in the same structure under the same name, or within the same system. This is how the Roanoke colony is remembered, not as a place that vanished without trace, but as a place that changed form and was never clearly seen again.